I would go to the mailbox every day and check and see if another card had come. And almost every day for about 2 or 3 weeks, there would be another card in there. And every one of those cards as I opened, I was excited to see who had sent me some congratulations, but more than that, I was excited to see who had sent me some cash or a check. Because I was graduating from high school. I was getting ready to go into college and I was broke and I was excited because for no real reason other than people saying thanks and here's a little bit to help you on your way, people were sending me money for the first time in my life. Like just sending me money. It was great. I probably got $300, which at that time I thought, man, I may as well spread it out and roll around in it because that was an immeasurable amount of money for me. And over the next few weeks, I was very careful with it as I went out to eat as often as I wanted, as I went to movies and hung out with my friends as much as I wanted, as I went for extra long drives and used up the gas in my parents' car and had to replace it with my own money, as I went to the mall and bought clothes because I'd never been able to just go and do that whenever I wanted before. And before very long, it was all gone. You know, Jesus tells us the story in the middle of this series of 3 parables. And the story is the story of the lost son, or what we call the prodigal son. And we talked about how Jesus told the parable of the lost sheep, how he would leave the 99 to find the one. And then there's another parable in the middle here where he talks about a woman who loses a coin and searches until she finds it and then celebrates when she finds this lost coin. And the last of these 3 parables about lost things is about a son. You see, the Pharisees had been asking Jesus, why do you spend so much time with these sinners? And Jesus' response was, I'd leave the 99 for the one. I'd search until I found what was missing. And then he finishes with this parable of the lost son. Now, this is probably the most famous parable that Jesus tells. Maybe the Good Samaritan would rival that, but all of you know this story. Even if you're not a Christian in our culture, you've heard of the prodigal son. You know the story of the son who was the younger of 2 brothers who goes to his father and asks for his inheritance. Basically says, Dad, I don't even want to wait for you to die. I've had enough of this family. I just want to leave this house and have my own way. Give me my inheritance so I can do that. And as insulting as that was, the father did just that. He gave the son his inheritance. Then the son ran off to what would kind of be the equivalent of Vegas for us today. He runs off to Vegas and he spends all of his money on fake friends and prostitutes and gambling and liquor and everything else that you could waste your money on. And he wastes his whole life while he's out there. And before long, he has no friends, no money, no one to care for him. You know the story. He goes and he finds a job, the worst job you really could have for a Jew at that time, which was feeding pigs. It's the most kind of disgusting and unclean job you could have, even in the way of your religious thinking. And he's sitting there feeding these pigs and he thinks to himself as he looks at their food and envies what they have. And he says, you know what? Even the slaves, even the servants in my father's house ain't better than this. Maybe I can go home. Maybe if nothing else, I can at least beg for a job and be the lowest man on the totem pole at the service of my father's house. At least then I'd have food. At least then I'd have shelter. And you know the story. He goes home, and where's the father been this whole time? He's been on the porch watching for the son's return, knowing what was going to happen. He knew what was going to happen when the son asked for the money. He knew what was going to happen when he gave the son the money. He knew that son would be coming back broke and desperate at some point, and he was just waiting. And when he sees him coming down the road, you know the story. He gets up and he sprints. An embarrassing thing for a grown man to do in that culture. He runs and he hugs his son. He brings him back to the house. He puts a fancy robe and a ring on him, and he instructs the servants to kill the fattest calf they have and to have a party like they've never had before. How beautiful is it to know that there's a father who loves us in the way that this father is? Because in the story, the father on the porch waiting for us to come home is God our Father. And we are the sons who've wandered away and wasted everything. But it's usually where the story stops. We know there's more to the story. We know there's another brother, an older brother, who actually gets upset that the son has gone and squandered all of his wealth and still been welcomed home as a son. He goes to his father and he says, Dad, I've been faithful. I've been sitting here working for you. Me and my friends haven't even had a little goat to share and have a party with. And he goes off and wastes everything. And when you welcome him back, you give him an extravagant party. That's not fair to me. And Jesus is talking to the Pharisees when he tells this part of the story. Because he says, look, you don't think it's fair that I invite everyone back into the family, that I welcome my own children back in after they've done so much wrong. But son, you need to understand, and this is what he says in Luke chapter 15, verse 31. My son, the father said, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. In our culture, when we say the word prodigal, we think of talking about a son who leaves and is lost in the wilderness, only to return later. You may have even used that phrase in reference to your own children or some family friends, that they have a prodigal who's out kind of doing crazy things in the world. But that word actually means wasteful. That word actually means a person who wastes all of their wealth. I was a prodigal when I had $300 in my pocket after high school from graduation. Not because I left my family, but because I blew my fortune. And I just want to ask you, when we think of a prodigal, we often think of somebody who's wandered far away. But you know what? You can be a prodigal sitting in a pew in a church. You can be a prodigal watching this video at home. You can be a prodigal by wasting what it is that the Father has given you. By spending it on yourself. By using it for your own pleasure and for your own fortunes. And the results are going to be the same. When we use what God has blessed us with for ourselves, we waste it. And it will eventually run out. And we'll come back to God. You might be at that point where you're ready to return to God, and you may be thinking to yourself, but he's going to be so disappointed. He's already disappointed in me. He's seen what I've done. He knows what I've done. And he's going to be so disappointed. How sweet it is to know that we have a Father who runs to us the minute we turn and head his way. And he says, I don't care what you've wasted, and I don't care where you've been, and I don't even want to know what you've done. I love you. You're my child. Welcome home because you were lost and now you're found. If you're not a Christian today, you are a prodigal in the biggest sense of the word. God has blessed you with life. He's blessed you with this world and everything in it and the chance to know him in a personal relationship, and you've wasted it and become an enemy of God by doing for yourself first. And yet he welcomes you back. And if you're a Christian watching this, you might be a prodigal too, in the sense that you've accepted Christ, you've trusted him for salvation, you've been given access to him as a father, and yet you've still lived on your own and for your own. Maybe it's time for you to come back today too. And none of us should be the big brother watching from the sidelines saying, I've had it right the whole time. All of us should be running alongside this Father to those that are returning. Is it a family member this Thanksgiving and Christmas who's trying to make it right? Is it a son or a daughter or a brother or sister who's trying to make it right? Is it a friend who you've been on the outs with, who maybe you've got a chance to heal that relationship? Just as we run to the Father and are accepted no matter what we've wasted, we need to accept those who are running to the Father too. And join in that party that God says, yes, we're having a party because they were dead and now they're alive. They were lost and now they're found. I pray that you today, who once were dead, are now alive in Christ. You who were lost are now found.